Hello, I'm Dennis Ward, host of Louisiana Heartbeats, and this week I have author, children's author, illustrator, art director, and graphics designer Denise Gallagher. Thank you for coming. Denise is a very talented, special lady, and you have had a really great year this year. Um, you've had a new book, Tip Top Tail, published by the University of Louisiana Press. You've been a past commercial art director
Yes.
and graphics designer. Tell the viewers, what is your educational background? How did you start? Where did you start?
Well, it kind of started as a child. I drew constantly. My parents, when they sent me off to college, they knew that there was no question I was going to do something in the arts. What that was at the time, it was in the '80s. We didn't know, but they sent me to UL. I got a little scholarship, and I went into the art department and took a bunch of classes. And, for a little while there, I started to get nervous thinking, I can't be a fine artist. Fine artists have deep and meaningful things to say. And I don't have anything deep and meaningful to say. So then one day I wandered up to the third floor where the graphic design department was, and met Dutch Kepler and met some of the students there and saw what the work that they were doing. And I said, this is for me. It's creative, it's building things, it's making things, it's coming up with headlines. But it doesn't have to be deep and meaningful. It just has to sell something or move somebody. So that's what I went into. And I made that my major in the art department, graduated from UL with Dutch Kepler as my professor, and went on to uh, work in the advertising field here in Lafayette, at different agencies. It was off and on at first. It's kind of bumpy in the beginning. Like an agency loses a big client and you're the low man on the totem pole. But gradually, I worked myself up to art director and then senior art director. And I worked in advertising in Lafayette for 20 years before I
20
started
years.
my own business, focusing on illustration and writing, and still with graphic design in there too. So,
Your There's a picture of your book, Tip Tap Tail, and tell us a little bit about the inspiration for this book.
I wrote a tip tap tale many years ago, but it was called A Dog Named Elvis. And it was basically about, and it rhymed, which was terrible, but it was about a dog who, a country dog, city dog kind of thing, and the storyline was still the same, but it didn't have the cultural flair and flavor that a tip tap tale does. When I joined the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, and went to a conference, I was given the advice to, draw from my own experiences. And living here in Acadiana in Louisiana, I was born in New Orleans, grew up in New Orleans, and moved to Lafayette and stayed here when I met my husband and settled down. So I have experiences both New Orleans and Lafayette, and those things influenced the book tremendously, because Buzu, the Louisiana mud brown hound dog, who this is the main character of the story, he has a home in the swamp and he's happy in the swamp, but he goes to the big city of New Orleans to put on a show. And it's kind of his, back and forth between that. Um, but yeah, so I rewrote it. I rewrote it as a tip tap tale, changed the dog's name to Buzu, wrote it in prose instead of poetry, which made it much better. And when the University of UL Lafayette approached me for if I had I had worked on a project with Barry Ancelet, and when they asked me, oh, do you have any personal projects that you'd like to submit? I was like, oh, sure. So I submitted, and they loved it. I just happened to have, a book dummy and the whole manuscript and everything, and they loved it and said, can you have everything done in 9 months? And which, books take a long time, but 9 months is, but I was like, sure, I can do it, and I did. And I was really, really happy, because I had always dreamed of being an author and illustrator for children. Children's literature has inspired me ever since I was little. and it's really what I wanted to do. So it was kind of a dream come true.
Well, your books are very unique in the sense that flora, fauna, the characters are whimsical. Um, you draw from so many elements of characters that look ancient as well as like a mythological. And I wondered just, when I first had that book in my hands, the depth where this comes from within you. It's tremendous.
I am an avid reader, and I love art, art history, and all cultures, art, folk art. Things that are meaningful and deep and powerful. They touch me, and I want I I draw from those experiences when I see art that is particularly deep or meaningful, and or read something or hear music, and it kind of flows through me and kind of gets jumbled up in my brain and comes out of me as a part of me. So yeah, so I take my influences from so many different places, but definitely folk art and fairy tales and ancient myths and those kind of things, and unusual animals. I like things that are not your typical mainstream sort of thing, which is kind of difficult as an illustrator because oftentimes in illustration, for commercial illustration especially, you're called to do some more mainstream things, which is fine. But my personal favorites are when I get to do just really kind of dark or whimsical, but dark and whimsical. My art has been called both, and I like to include those sort of hints at an other world or hints at a deeper story in behind what's going on in the scene that I'm illustrating.
Well, children must just be absorbed so
Hopefully.
much. Do you get feedback from the kids?
I do, yes. They all seem to love it. In A Tip Tap Tale, which actually my editor had the idea of, there's a flea that follows Boozoo from the swamp to New Orleans, and the flea appears. It was James's idea to have the flea appear on every spread. And when I tell children about that, they're fascinated. They want to find the flea. Sometimes he's little, sometimes he's big, and he's a purple flea, and then he causes chaos at the show in New Orleans. But kids love that. And then I love the use of language. So even though the story doesn't rhyme, there's alliteration. There's a sort of a bounciness to the words and the language that I use that I think kids are really drawn to. I've done school readings, and even the little ones, they that dog is hot, that dog can rock, that dog is out of sight. They kind of like it and laugh, and so it's really fulfilling for me as an artist and illustrator and author to get that kind of response, and that's why I do what I do, is to affect children in a way, and everybody. I want them to feel something, and to want to own or just to be a part of what I've done or what I've created. So
that's great.
Thank you.
Well, the inspiration you've talked about. Now, tell me more about the process and the medium you use and how the art is actually produced.
I have two different styles, really. A tip-tap tail is more of a vector-based. I always start with pencil and paper. In fact, I carry a sketchbook with me everywhere I go. I have a little sketchbook, and whenever an idea hits, I draw a lot. And I always start with drawing, and many drawings, thumbnail drawings, until I work something out to a more completed stage. But then I move on to the computer and finish the illustrations digitally. A tip-tap tail is more of a vector-based outlines of shapes and colors, more flat, although I bring it into Photoshop and kind of paint it and add shadows. But then my fine art pieces, which are, I've done things that have been in galleries and shows like that, those are, I actually use the pencil drawing lines to have that hand-drawn I like the way a pencil just feels, and I have this love affair with pencils. In fact, my husband once gave me a bouquet of sharpened pencils because my favorite brand. And but the pencil line, there's just something, it gets dark, it gets lighter, and so I keep that sensibility about it, but I add color and textures and shading and patterns to give it. I have the freedom to push and pull, but by using the computer, and yet it still maintains that hand done, printed sort of watercolor sort of feel, and which I like.
Well, if we can change the graphic to the 2016 Festival of
Yes, the Festival International.
Chanel. Next one.
Yes.
Yes, this
That
one.
that is an example of pencil with computer work. So all of the lines were drawn with a pencil, and it was all scanned in. And I did like in different parts, and I did a lot of research for that. That was really a big honor to represent
yes.
the festival, international. I mean, that's my city telling me, hey, we think you're cool, you're all right, and we want you to represent us. And so, I love the festival. I go every year, and so I really drew on the experiences that I remembered that I'd had. The performers on stage under blue lights, and the dream, and the just the smells and the sounds and the sights of festivals. So it's the lyrical dream of the festival is the name of the piece.
I think you really captured a lot of the musical talent. Our guests from Central Africa, and there's that ancient feel to the poster.
I had so much fun just researching the instruments. I mean, they're all tied with string, with little beads, and all the little things and everything sort of has meaningful markings, or and just. It's not just there as decoration, it actually has meaning. And that's what drew me to those sorts of things too, is that, and then, there's a parade, a Canadian parade where they use these big paper mache heads, and those are meaningful too. So that's included in there. And so, it's these cultural phenomena or these icons, or these things that, really have meaning that just inspire me.
Well, you have garnered many awards, many distinctions. Besides the honor of doing your Lafayette's 2016 Festival International poster, please give the viewers just a bit of the history of your honors that you've received and the recognition. I think it's great.
Oh, thank you. Well, let's see. When I was in advertising, I was named Art Director of the Year for Acadiana Advertising Federation 6 times throughout my career.
Wonderful.
And then my final year, right before I left, I was given the Silver Medal Award, which is the American Advertising Federation's highest honor for influencing advertising in the community. And it's part of it was for the work that I do with students. I talk to students from little kindergarten all the way up to college age. In fact, I spoke to a class of students this morning, and I try to give back to the community by doing that, because I love my job and I love what I do, and I feel that if I can inspire at least one student every time I speak to them, I feel like I've given back. So there's that, and then I had a piece that was included in the New York Society of Illustrators, which is a pretty big deal, because it's the best of the best. And I had a piece included in that show, and I went to New York for the show and met some of my idols. I have illustrators who are I really am impressed by, and they were there. Their work was hanging next to mine, and that was just something to be really proud of. And I was also included in the Society of Illustrators Los Angeles 3 times. Yeah, that's, recently.
The Indiana
yes.
Society.
This past winter, I had a piece included in the University of Indianapolis Museum's gallery show, and it was called Illustration Women Making a Mark. And they had 15 illustrators invited, all women who in the illustration industry, and I was really flattered that they asked me to enter or be a part of the show. So I created a new piece for the show, and when I got the list of illustrators to see that who was also included, I was floored and very honored, because many of the illustrators that I've looked up to since I was in college, female illustrators, were in the show. So that was a huge honor, and I was proud as a woman in illustration to represent Acadiana, Louisiana, and to be included in that show. So.
Well, you said you were an art director, commercial art director, and graphics designer, and then now you're a children's author and illustrator. So what was the turning point from?
Well, I really enjoyed being in advertising, and I had a great career, and I wouldn't change a thing. I was happy. I did a lot of great work. I worked with some great people. But about 9 years ago, it was in January, when you're kind of thinking about going over your life and things like that. And I turned to my husband. I said, I just don't feel like I'm being as creative as I could be. I don't feel challenged anymore. And he looked at me and he said, when we met back in college, you carried a sketchbook with you wherever you went, and you drew constantly all the time, and you don't draw anymore, just for fun, just for yourself. And I kind of took a step back, and I was like, you're right. So I bought a sketchbook and some pencils, and I decided right then and there that I was going to draw for fun. And even though it wasn't always fun, at first it was hard because I was rusty, and I was tight, I wasn't as free. But I took a year, and even, on top of, I had a new baby, or a young baby, and I had a 40-hour-a-week job, and, and all the things, and I was, married and that kind of thing, but I would carve out a little time each week, and I would create one illustration per week. And I did that for an entire year, and I did not miss a week. And I had a blog, and I posted each illustration over the weeks, and I had friends who would comment, and as the weeks progressed, my work became better, and my style began to emerge. It was amazing. It's like when you're a student, you crave, I need a style, and it's like you look through books of illustration, or you look online, and you're like, I need a style, and I want to be like this person or that person. But it has to come organically, and that's what happened over that year. At first I drew with pen, and I was really tight. Then I moved on to pencil. It started loosened up, and then I started, getting more and more just different style, looser, and just more the me coming out on the page. And then I started adding color and bringing into Photoshop and adding textures and playing around with themes, and just different things just started coming out. And at the end of the year, I started getting offers to be in gallery shows, illustration projects, and I was like, I think I could do this, So
it was all there.
Yeah.
inside.
So a few years later, I left advertising and started my own business. And in January, I celebrated 5 years in
Wow.
business as Denise Gallagher Design and Illustration. And I have never been happier, because I'm choosing projects, and because I have the freedom, I get to work. I still do, plenty of graphic design, which is great. And because I knew so many people in the industry, and people, having been in advertising for 20 years, I knew how to run a business. I knew more about, what it takes, timesheets, invoices, all that business stuff. I learned all that being, working at an ad agency, and how to have meetings, and how to discuss marketing plans and those kind of things. So I could never have done it without having been in that business first. And so I um, yeah, so it was perfect timing. And then I made the decision a year after I started my own business that I really wanted to write a children's book and illustrate a children's book. And so that's when I joined the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators and attended conferences. And I learned that there's a whole lot to know about writing a book and illustrating a book. It's different than just doing a one-off for an advertising project or a graphic design project. There's a whole storytelling. It's like making a movie, zooming in and out, pacing, that kind of thing. So by doing that, and I met people, and I started to network, and that's when really my children's book dreams started coming true then too. So I've gotten to do the things that I wanted to do, things that matter, things that mean something to me and are beautiful and lasting. So, which is why I started my own business in the first place.
Well, that's great. And you've mentioned before to me that you have a community here, quote unquote, you found your tribe.
Have I tried? Yes, I did. Well, finding Squibby is what I call it. Joining them and going to the conferences, it was like, these are the people who understand me. Like we all have this sort of outlook of, like that harkens back to childhood, or the simplicity of childhood, or and storytelling, and lush, vivid minds and memories and imaginations that we all share. And it's fun though, because we're all working on different sorts of projects. But the people I've met, I mean, we could sit and talk to each other about each other's projects, and it's just fascinating to me being together with these people. And we have a local group of Squibby members, but you don't have to be a Squibby member. As long as you write or illustrate for children, we meet once a month at the library, and we read manuscripts, we critique each other's work, we share our illustrations, and it's been great, because it inspires me to create more. Every time I have a meeting, or every time I meet or go to a conference, it just inspires me to be even more creative.
That shared energy is
there.
It's
something. I mean, it really, really is
feeds
something.
Your spirit, I'm sure.
Absolutely. To be around a group of creative people, like-minded creative people, is really, it's nurturing, yeah.
Well, I'm a fan of yours, and I would like to know what's on the horizon.
Well, right now I am illustrating a folktale that's an old, ancient folktale from Newfoundland.
Oh, cool.
They love me in Canada, and I love my Canadian peeps. So I'm illustrating a picture book of a Canadian folktale, and then I'm also writing a middle grade fiction novel, which is my first foray into novel writing, which, at first I was like, that's kind of scary, but I had an idea, and I had images in my brain of this story, and it was longer than a picture book. Picture books are only about 600 words, and I had more that I wanted to say about this character and his story. And so I decided that I'd take a stab. And
That's
so
great.
I'm bringing my manuscript to an editor next weekend, and so hopefully she loves it.
Good luck.
Thank you. But it's been fun, and that's what I've been reading at my critique group, and everyone seems to like it. So, but it's a challenge, but it feels right. So yeah.
Well, good luck.
Thank you.
With this. There's a lot of young people, I'm sure, out there that are in awe of your career, and it didn't happen overnight. And
a lot of hard work.
What would you say to somebody just starting out, contemplating a career in art?
I would say work hard at what you love every day, or like make time for what you love, even if you have to work at the mall, or keep it up, keep your eye on what your dream is. Do your research, study what you want, study what it is you want to do, and that path, and make sure that you connect with other people who are doing what you like to do, and ask them questions. I mean, that's what I was telling the students today. I was like, email me if you have a question about anything that I've spoken to them about today, because that's how as now an artist who's been there, may have answers that can help. So, and I love to help others. So, you know, find somebody who's doing what you like to do and ask them questions. I have friends who do that all the time. So, and just keep it up. Don't quit if it gets hard. Work hard. It takes hard work, and sometimes it's discouraging, but just keep it up and keep going. Thanks.
Well, you're an inspiration to me and many others. And thank you for being on the show.
Oh, thank you, Dennis, for having me.
It was a really educational event, and look forward to seeing more of your art.
Thank you so much.
Okay, that was great. You're one of the best.
Really?
Yeah.
Thank you.